Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members, officers and members of the public. Can I welcome you to this planning meeting of the 21st of July. Also welcome Councillor Keane, who's new with us tonight down there. Wing, I beg your pardon. Why did I say King? It started off well there. Beg your pardon, that was my fault as well. No, sorry. Right, as always, housekeeping members. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs where you came in, either through the security door, which I always say this is to my right, behind Charles. Use the corridor. Please do not use the lifts, and assemble in Hawley Square on the green, where officers will assist you when it is deemed safe for you to return to this chamber. Does anybody intend filming this meeting? Could they please put their hand in the air? I can't see any, thank you. Move on to restrictions, obviously, of mobile phones, but everybody present, please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber while this meeting is in progress. And just to let members and the members of the public know, we are being live streamed as the meeting takes place. Members requesting to speak under Council Procedure 20.1, Councillor Braidwood, Gregory, Farrance and Scott. And that is on item of land of northwest and southeast sides of Shottendale Road. If there's any other member who I haven't called out, speaking tonight, could they let me know, please? And that's obviously apart from the committee. Thank you, members. Public speaking. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Would members please make a note the following items on their agenda. Agenda item 6A, which is A01, the Foresters Arms in Boundary Road, 48 Boundary Road, Ramsgate. Also agenda item 6D, D04, 49 St Peter's Road. Agenda item 1, I have apologies from Councillor Paul Moore, and he is substituted by Councillor Phil Fellows. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rozecki has sent his apologies. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Which I know there are. Thank you very much. Councillor Hart has declared interest in item 6B, which is 32 Shakespeare Road.
Can we ask what it is today?
Yes, can we?
Yes, Chair, it's my house, it's where I live.
I thought it was, so therefore, as members know and members of the public, if any member of staff or members of the council have an application in front of us or submit an application, obviously they declare interest, and I will ask Councillor Hart to leave the chamber. Agenda item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee, which was held on the 23rd of June. Do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 23rd June 2021 be approved and signed by myself? Now, I believe there is a query. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to question on page 1920. It hasn't minuted the fact that we refused the application on Shottendale Road and asked for it to be officers to come back with to document reasons for that refusal, but we actually agreed that that was refused. So I think it should be minuted.
I will turn to Miss Livingston or James. Yes, sorry. Yes, sir. Miss Livingston, thank you.
The discussion and the motion that was put forward by myself, which was then repeated
but outlined in a slightly different way, was to bring back to consider reasons for refusal. Members, I think, and again, I'm not going to necessarily speak for members, and members can speak about this or not, wasn't to confirm refusal with regards to reasons. It was to consider the reasons for refusal. And obviously the main issue was that it wouldn't be sensible to vote for refusal without actually having any reasons to refuse it in terms of the detail of those reasons, which is why obviously the motion was put forward, or suggested as put forward from the chair here.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Garner?
Well, not really, because we did actually make it quite clear among all of ourselves that we refused the application. The reason it was deferred was because we couldn't agree amongst ourselves the actual document those reasons for that refusal. We spoke about all the reasons, and I think we agreed a lot of the reasons, but we were asking for it to be documented in such a way that it could be agreed formally. But there was no doubt that we agreed to refuse the application.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I'm going to ask our solicitor, S.L. Cullinan, to come back to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks very much, Councillor Garner. The difficulty is, as Mr Livingston has said, you can't refuse without clear reasons. So we understand what you're saying, but in order to collate those proper reasons and to go away and get some coherent reasons, that was the proposal put forward from the Chair, to defer for reasons for refusal. And so you've got a report today before you with some cogent reasons for refusal, and then an explanation of why some of the other reasons for refusal wouldn't be appropriate. And then there's some additional information on there relating to a letter that's come forward from Gladman's. So it is appropriate for you to consider that report before you. If you're still considering refusing, then obviously looking at the reasons for refusal, because you can't make it's very, well, you can, but it's quite risky to make a decision to refuse without reasoned reasons, because legislation and guidance says you must have reasoned reasons. So that's why the motion was put forward worded that way last time. It's a nuance, but that's why. Thank you.
Okay, well, okay, as long as it's understood, and I think we all understand that when we have the debate on the Shottendene Road tonight, it is around agreeing what those reasons are for the refusal, which we agreed at the last planning committee.
I also understand what Mr. has stated here, Councillor Garner.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up, though, and hope you've got the right explanation there. So therefore, I do propose that the minutes are correct for the meeting on the 23rd of June. Could I beg your pardon? It's been explained to Councillor Garner, and I can understand the reasons why Councillor Garner's question has been brought, and I feel that has been answered correctly. Councillor Green.
Will Councillor Garner's comments and questions be minuted for tonight?
I'm sure they will be. Yes. Yes. Thank you. So therefore, could I have a proposal that the minutes with a slight alteration or addition will go ahead? Proposer, please. Councillor Coleman Cook, could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Hart. Members agree? Very quiet, but I will take that as read and agreed. Agenda item 4, the planning application for Edinan House Business Centre in Addington Place. I called upon the planning officer, who will now outline the report. Emma.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. The application site is outlined in red on this plan here. So the site is adjacent to Hertford Place and backs onto Addington Place. This is the existing building that members saw at the previous meeting. So this building here is for demolition, and the proposal is to replace this building with 5 3-storey 3-bed houses and 1 3-storey 4-bed house. So again, this is the building here, the L-shaped building in white, and it's proposed to demolish this building with new build development fronting onto Hertford Place. So these photos are just to remind members, these were taken from Hertford Place, so the application site is on the right hand side here, so it's this section here from this wall, and so this element here is to be demolished. And then again, just parts of the wall. So as members remember, there's flint within the wall, and this was raised as one of the issues, but I believe members considered that the loss of the wall was not a significant concern. And this again is the application site. So again, this wall here is to be demolished, and then again taken further from the neighbouring properties opposite, looking back at the application site. And then this is opposite the site in Hertford Place. These are existing neighbouring properties, so just showing the height and layout of these properties. And then inside the neighbouring properties opposite. And then this is taken from Addington Place to the rear, so this is the existing road. So the access into the site is in this location here. And this is a building on the left-hand side of the access, and you can see the existing buildings are back onto it. So that currently some are in residential use and some are in commercial. And this is now inside the site looking into the rear elevation of the existing building. So the current building is in commercial use, currently offices, and the proposal is for residential. And again, another view inside the site looking at the existing building. So all of this building here would be demolished. And then back in Addington Place, just looking along the access road with the application site being on the left-hand side here. So this was the layout plan that members saw at the previous meeting. So this was the plan showing the demolition of the existing building and its replacement with the 6 units. So the unit in this location here is the larger 4-bed unit, and these 5 units here are the 3-bed units. There was 2 parking spaces associated with the development, so they were located in this position here, and this building here was the refuge store. To the rear of the properties, they each had their own garden, and access into the parking spaces was via the existing access point from Addington Place. And then this is just showing in more detail the parking spaces that were proposed as part of the previous application, and you can see the refuge store as well, and the elevations at that on the bottom of this plan. This was the elevation of the proposed development, so it showed that there were 2-storey units with accommodation at roof level with a dormer. So this was the elevation fronting onto Hertford Place at the top of this plan, and at the rear was the rear elevation that you would see through the access gap from Addington Place, and it shows that it is at 3-storey level, but you would only get a sense of that through the access. So when members considered this at the last committee meeting, I understood that the main principle of the development of replacing the existing building with the residential development was not of a concern, nor was the loss of the existing flint wall. The main concerns that members raised were to do with the number of units and the lack of parking provision. So in terms of the this was just the layout plan as well, showing the units, and again you can see the detailed garden layout of them. So what's happened since is that an amended plan has been submitted. The amended plan does not show a reduction in units, but it does show a small increase in parking provision. So here again is the 2 parking spaces that were previously proposed, and now an additional 1 parking space is proposed in this location here, which is adjacent to number 46 Addington Place. So this now provides 3 parking spaces for the 6 units. This parking space here is now within the blue line, but that's still within the applicant's control, so this would be enforceable and able to be provided as part of the scheme. So the main considerations are whether the lack of this parking is a concern. Policy SPO6 of the Thanet local plan is in relation to car parking provision, and it states that proposals for development will be expected to make satisfactory provision for the parking of vehicles. The policy then refers to maximum space standards. The maximum space standards for this form of development, being that it's located on the edge of the town centre, would be a maximum of 1 parking space per 3-bed unit and 1.5 spaces for the 4-bed unit. So the maximum parking provision that would be expected for this site would be 6.5 spaces. And as you're aware, there's 3 parking spaces provided, so it's 3.5 spaces short of the maximum provision. KCC Highways have been reconsulted following the submission of this plan and asked for further comments. They have again raised no objections to the provision. They consider that the site is sustainably located. It's in walking distance of a bus route and in close proximity to the town centre. And given the fact that it is a maximum parking standards and not minimum parking standards, they feel that there is not a justified reason to object to the scheme on highway safety grounds. Other considerations are the fact that the existing building already generates the need for parking provision. I'm not quite sure of the exact comparison in terms of floor space, but obviously you saw from the photos that there is currently parking provision to the rear of the units. So it's, but you would have to consider the relationship between the existing situation with that parking for the commercial units versus the proposal for the dwellings and whether there would be an actual increase. The other consideration is the fact the site lies within the conservation area. So policy SP06 does allow for a reduction in parking provision where the parking provision itself would actually impact on the conservation area. So again, members raised concerns at the previous meeting that there were too many units on the site and that potentially one unit should be removed in order to provide parking provision. This would potentially result in a gap within this length of development. Now, as you saw from the images, the photos, there's currently a full development, the full length of this site, and that continues beyond both sides, so there's no gap within the street elevation. So the question would be, would a gap in the street elevation actually be detrimental to the conservation area given the historic layout of the site and the fact that that's the existing pattern of development? So actually from officers' point of view, we would actually want to encourage the retention of a full street elevation along here and not actually see any gap in order to provide parking. And parking, obviously the visual impact of parking on a conservation area, it's not traditional to have parking as part of historic developments. And therefore, it's what impact would that have to actually have a view of parking from Hertford Place. So, on balance, given the fact that there has been one increase in parking spaces and the fact that it is maximum parking standards, the fact that KCC Highways have raised no objections to the development and considered that whilst there will be a reduction, less than one space per unit, this would actually be more of an inconvenience for the future occupiers rather than an actual highway safety issue. And given that it's a sustainable site and close to the town centre, it's not considered there's a justification for refusing the application on lack of parking provision. So it is recommended that members approve this scheme as set out in option 3.1, which seeks to amend the conditions for the approved plans to allow for this additional parking space and also the parking condition, which then now enables the parking space within the blue line to be provided as part of the scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members? Councillor... Yes, go on.
Alban, Chair. Thank you very much.
The name's gone.
You're very welcome,
Alban.
Chair.
It's the heat.
Any time I can help you, Chair, I'm more
I
than
know
happy
you
to
will.
do so. Chairman, I thank Ms Fibbins for bringing this back here. I am concerned about this site. I was concerned the last time. The extra parking space is not within the development. It's not within the application that's before us. It's on land adjacent, which the owner of and the developer of the site owns. So we can't. I'm sure we can't enforce that because it's not. It doesn't form part of the application. Otherwise, that would be outlined in red. So can I just ask if the officers can they confirm that or?
Councillor Ian Nimson.
Thank you, Chair. So it would be controlled by the specific condition. In terms of enforceability, we do think that if it wasn't provided, it would be a breach condition notice that could be served, which would cover the blue line land because it's in the control of the applicant, and so we do think the condition would cover it.
Councillor Orban. Do you wish to come back?
Yeah, I'd just find it, I'm having a bit of difficulty with this. We find that we could take it, not that we can, we could. Anyway, let's move on from that. I don't think there's enough car parking space here. I do believe that the end property, the 4-bedroom house, is just overdevelops the site. If the smaller house, if it was the same as the other one, you could get parking up the side and it'd still have his 6 houses. You know, that's, for me, is it. And bless KCC Highways, bless their little hearts, but sometimes they don't get it right, and I think we'll prove that a bit later on this evening. And so I am concerned about this, Chair, and I can't support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't at the meeting when this was brought before members previously, so this may have already been answered then. But how exactly are those 3 car parking spaces to be allocated? Is it just first come, first served?
I believe the intention was to actually have the 2 parking spaces in this location here were actually going to be allocated to the larger unit, but I'm not aware who would be allocated this single space. I'm afraid I don't have that information.
Okay, Councillor Keane. Councillor Wing. Okay, I will.
It's okay, you didn't call me Councillor Alban, which is a plus.
Yeah, I know. It's,
I spoke.
much as she would like it,
I just need to check what the rules are for me, because I spoke on 20.1 because I wasn't a member of planning at that moment. So am I now allowed to speak as a member of planning? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I spoke quite extensively on behalf of a large number of residents who I believe put planning complaints in, and I believe that it was discussed that 1 unit should just go completely. I don't actually buy the whole car parking and conservation, because all of our conservation areas are absolutely blighted by the number of cars that are there. So although we've got an increased allocation of 1, each of those houses has a potential to produce 2 more cars. So I think the whole conservation and parking is blown out of the water, actually. I still have a concern about the flint wall. We're losing our flint walls. It's a very significant flint wall. But there you go. There are gaps within that area. I know that area very well. I live around the corner. There are different heights and different styles of buildings within that whole area, particularly Addington Place and Addington Street. Also on Nelson Crescent, we've got different sizes and styles of Georgian properties. So I also don't get the whole argument about keeping the streetscape the same, or not having a gap there, or having a lower bit. I'm with Councillor Alban. I think that whole building at the end should just go, and I thought that was what was suggested. Go back to the developer and tell him to remove 1 unit. So that's what I think.
thank you, Councillor Wing. Do I see any other speakers at all? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I do remember this, and I think the other issue we had on this was the fact that people have green spaces allocated to their houses, and that they might end up knocking the walls down or the fencing down, and then everybody parking their cars in the garden, so nobody's got a green space. And I think that was one of the issues raised as well. And I'm very loath to accept that one property has 2 car parking spaces, and the other 5 have to fight tooth and nail to get the last one. And no disrespect to planning, most of us have at least 1 car in the family, and I don't think that you've got 5 people or 5 families potentially fighting over 1 space is sufficient. I mean, we did say at the time we thought that the developer should remove a property. I mean, if the developer wanted to change the 4-bedroom detached house into a flat, so you still keep your landscape and you can park underneath, everybody would be happy. I mean, he's still keeping a building there, but people park underneath it, and you'd have the allocated parking. So I don't see what the issue is. It's just a developer trying to overdevelop the land, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Emma.
I just wanted to come back on the point made in terms of it was expected that a unit would disappear. We did actually go back to the developer with members' concerns and suggested that that 1 unit was removed and parking increased. This is the plan that we have before us now, so there was not it was not they did not decide to reduce a unit, they just wanted to increase one parking space, and they just want members to make a decision based on this plan. So it's not possible to get reduction in units because they don't want to amend it. I would also say, though, in terms of what's been talked about in terms of parking provision, the fact that you would expect units to have a requirement for parking spaces, that is true, but the whole point is that we have a policy that looks at maximum parking standards because the government's just encouraging us to look at sustainable forms of transport, and that is why we have maximum. We used to have minimum, but now we have maximum, and that's because we're trying to encourage people to cycle, encourage them to get the bus, and this is located close to the town centre, close to other facilities, so it would be encouraging people to not have a car. I know that's not always practical, but that's what the government encourages, and that's what the policy is requiring, and that's why it's very difficult for us to object to applications on lack of parking where the policy is looking at a maximum provision rather than a minimum.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fellows.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with everyone else. That one property needs to be removed for the parking. I think it's crazy to think that there's going to be 5 family homes, one very large family home, and you're going to say that 4 houses are not going to have a car in the day and age where everybody has a car and also a work vehicle, vans, in an area with where parking is at a premium. Where are people going to park? You cannot expect people in large family homes not to have cars. So this needs to be amended and refused tonight, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. Councillor Crinden. Sorry?
Okay, thank you. This is the first time I've seen this application. I wasn't on planning when it came up before. And I have to agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I'm very sorry to hear that we will be losing the Flint Wall. But also, this just looks so overdeveloped, and there is such a lack of green space and parking on the periphery of the town centre, let alone within the town centre, but which is where this is. It's on the periphery of the town centre. And I can't see five households fighting over one parking space. Just doesn't work.
Thank
and
you,
I agree with the idea about flats.
Councillor Bakeford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was here before when we voted on this, and we did ask that one of the units be removed. Personally, I'm not in the least concerned about the Flint Wall because it's in an appalling state. It's like a patchwork quilt. So I don't think I have any concerns. And the building before it is very ugly. But I do feel this is a case of overdevelopment. I think perhaps if the larger unit were removed, adequate parking could be provided, and I think that would be much more appropriate. So I'm not terribly happy to support this application either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I also have got concerns about the fact that the lack of parking and the overdevelopment. But in relation to the Flint Wall, I'm not sure if I dreamt this, but normally I'd be very surprised if we didn't bring it up last time, that the flints could actually be retained and incorporated into the fabric of the new builds, which would retain the flint. But also, going back to the parking, there isn't enough parking, but nor is there any capacity for a charging point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Are any other members wishing to speak before we take this to the vote? Okay, members, I put this to you. Those in favour, could they please show for their hands, please? Those against? Any abstentions? That motion is lost. Just bear with me a moment, please. Yes. Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. So, hearing the debate from members, clearly the parking is the primary concern. You'll see in the report at 3.2 there is an option to refuse the application on the basically amended scheme on the grounds that the proposed number of units will not be provided with satisfactory parking provision to the detriment of highway safety and highway amenity and contrary to the relevant policies. That reason doesn't pick up the point that members are making about the need to remove the unit. Now, the question is whether or not members feel that there is impact on the actual the development in the sense of it being cramped and congested by virtue of having a unit that is that scale at the end. If that's the case, then I think to summarise what members have suggested, it would be suggested, recommended by officers that members would look to refuse the application on the grounds stated at 3.2, but also by virtue of the scale and design of the development, that it would result in a cramped and congested form of development contrary to policy QDO2 and the conservation area policy. So I wonder if the chair would permit whether or not anyone would like to propose a motion on that basis.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Orban.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Can I just ask Mr. Livingston, would it be size and scale, or are you just saying that, you know, because I think whether you're meaning the scale of the building is the size, if you're meaning that, I should just want to clarify that, otherwise I want to add size.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Yes, so we can say both. Scale, I mean, they are very similar, but in planning terms they can be taken to be different things. So
I like size.
I will. How about we have them both?
Thank you. So therefore, if you're
happy
that,
propose that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. You've heard the proposal. Could I have a seconder, please? Several hands going up. Just I've got it in capital letters now, Councillor Wing, and again I apologise. Seconded by Councillor Wing. Do members agree? Thank you, members. Thank you, Emma. I believe Emma is depart. Yes, you all wish to vote. All agree on the. Yeah. Okay. Do you all agree on that proposal? Thank you. Yes.
Did you vote?
I am.
You are.
Yeah. I know you told me before.
Yes, sorry,
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that, members. Agenda item 5, the planning application for the land of northwest and southeast of Shottendane Road in Margate. I will say this once again to members and to members of the public. I and members have had a lot of emails or correspondence from members of the public. If you don't get an answer every time, that it isn't to say that we're not looking and taking concerns, and some of them are very deep concerns about all sorts of matters. I think you understand that. It's not that we can't be bothered to do that, but I can assure you, and I hope I'm talking about every member here, do look at those emails or the correspondence. Thank you. Speaking under Council Procedure 20.1, first of all, can I ask Councillor Braywood, please?
Thank you, Chair. It appears residents in Thanet can now guarantee 4 things in life. 1 is death, 2 is taxes, 3 occasional missed bin collections, and 4 that members of this planning committee will be discussing the Shottendane Road application. I very much hope after today that this application finally gets kicked into the long grass. Like I've mentioned previously, we're not anti-development here in Thanet, but we must absolutely put local residents first. 29% of Thanet residents are on low income, which reflects perfectly in our local plan, which suggests that any development over 1,000 square metres shall be required to provide 30% of the dwellings as affordable housing. On average, earnings for residents in Thanet are in the bottom 20% of the whole of England. So this council not only has a duty to represent local residents when deciding applications, but it has a duty to represent residents nationally as well. The lousy 15% currently being offered by this developer is an insult, The fact they can offer a 5% increase in affordable housing 3 weeks apart shows that margins can be increased when they need to be, but I imagine that greed has a part to play in this. I would also question why we are meddling and concerned about the feasibility or profit that a housing development company generates. Surely that's for them to sort out. I want to thank the planning officers for guiding this committee through the legal process that's involved in rejecting an application like this one. Members should have confidence that a third rejection of this application comes with many valid and sufficient reasons for rejection, such as breaking with policies on affordable housing and biodiversity, as well as issues on flooding, sewage and the usual infrastructure issues such as sufficient access to GPs. In addition to this, TDC benefit from an overage agreement on the land sale, so this application has to be clear, transparent and fair, and to me, Chair, this application is far from it. I'd like to conclude by reminding members of a recent High Court judgment which was brought against TDC in a case they also had a vested interest in. This echoes the fact that great care and decision making needs to be taken when deciding the fate of an application, especially when the planning officer is recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braywood. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I hold you there, Councillor Scott, please? Chief Executive would like to have a word. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I do appreciate that this is a very sensitive and emotive issue, but I would just like to remind members about the appropriateness of comments in respect of officers and to try and avoid speculation about decisions that are made and interests that the Council has, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Scott, if you carry on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, totally agree with the comments that Councillor Braid put forwards, and to echo the same, I mean, to take on board just the mere allocation of 15% affordable housing. I mean, we are in an area of depravity, and essentially we are dutifully bound to actually provide affordable housing. From what I've read from a recent report, that this potential uplift is based on the KCC Highways ring road approval, and in my opinion that certainly should not be the situation. If developers are interested in the land that they want to develop on, they should meet the terms and conditions of the local plan that was agreed by the council. I mean, coming back to when I sat on the planning committee initially for the first time, this actually appeared in the committee. One of my main things that I did want to bring up was the situation with flooding. I know there has been a flood assessment, but this is all based on the situation of what we have at the moment, which is agricultural land which is designed and developed to obviously soak up that surface water, yet there is still flooding. Once development is on that will be a concrete jungle, of which we're not able to provide evidence of flooding because we have not yet built on that. But at that stage it will be too late. You'll be looking at potentially housing that could be affected by the flooding, and we could be pretty sure that these particular housing of affordability will be located no doubt by the areas of flooding. I do remember when we were discussing that a percentage of the actual application itself was going to be designed to have what at the time was mentioned as a flood basin, where it would capture any overflow. I called it a ditch, and at that stage it might have changed, but I reckon that real estate could have been applied for the housing that they were taking away from the affordability. And then lastly, just to basically touch on the infrastructure in itself, which is just obviously going forwards with the sewage side of things. This whole situation with Southern Water, as we all know, it's been recent that even on 17th of June they've had to discharge wastewater into our oceans, and yet we're proposing to build more housing. And the way I see it is, if you haven't got the infrastructure in place, how can you actually build housing viable that's going to provide sewage and adequate drainage for water? And at this stage at the moment, Southern Water have proven time and time again that they have not had that ability. 2010 to 2015, they've been charged £9 million to pay into it. I've heard that they were proposing to put £1 million into the infrastructure, and yet that hasn't happened. So, I mean, I hope today that the planning committee do obviously take this on board. I know that the focus and the recommendations are to put forward on the affordability of housing, but I do really want to push forward that infrastructure and flooding is also some issues that need to be highlighted within this application.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Speaking as Ward Councillor, Councillor Gregory, please.
Thank you, Chair. Much debate on the developer's request to reduce the number of affordable houses from 30% to 15%. As a consequence, the application was denied and held over for further discussions with the developers. However, the amount of affordable homes should be non-negotiable, and there are other issues at stake. This week, we have seen the devastation that flooding has caused in countries very near to us. We saw only last night areas in West Kent underwater. We have a real flood risk locally. There's been no mitigation of the flood risk that should happen if this plan would go ahead since the last planning committee meeting. Quite clearly, we can expect a greatly increased volume of surface water making its way into Tivoli Brook from rain falling on hard surfaces from the general household surface waste, which may contain chemicals. Any water containing chemicals and nitrates will inevitably make their way into Tivoli Brooks and therefore subsequently into Margate main sands via the outlet. Again, I must mention Southern Water's negligence, but also that water coming down from what was once fields that soaked up much rainwater, this cannot be absorbed by concrete. We hear yesterday of E. coli bacterium found in the coast locally. As this planning application could have a disastrous negative effect on the community, can TDC give the businesses dependent on tourism and the general public a cast iron guarantee that increased pollution into the sea will not result in the beach becoming unusable, and nothing less is acceptable? We hear today that TDC were in the High Court defending a development. One of the reasons Judge Timothy Corner quashed this at the judicial review was that TDC had produced an unsatisfactory habitat assessment. I haven't seen a habitat assessment from TDC regarding the Shottendane proposal, only one by concerned residents, which lists many plants, insects, larger animals, dormice, brown hares that call this area their home. This judicial review also found TDC...
Councillor Gregory, I don't like interrupting any member who's speaking, but please keep to this planning application. I do know where you're coming from, but we're talking about the Shottendane development. Thank you.
Well, this is about the Shottendane development.
Please carry on, but when you're bringing in other items which aren't really relevant for this application.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it relevant. So, the judicial review has happened, and it found that TDC acted in a biased way and broke its own rules by deciding this application behind closed doors. Of great concern is a resident who submitted a Freedom of Information request regarding the proposed Shottendane development. They asked to be provided with notes and minutes of any meeting between the developer of this site, any TDC officer, or any member of the
Councillor Gregory, please, you're quoting other items once again.
This is to do with this application. It's to do with Shottendane.
I'm going to ask our solicitor please to come in. I do not like stopping people. You have every right to speak, but it's got to be kept to this application. I do understand what you're trying to say, but I'm bringing in our solicitor at the moment.
Well, then it'll have to go unsaid.
Yes, I've had advice here, and I'm going to ask carry on, Councillor Gregory, and then I'm going to ask our Chief Solicitor to come in just to have a word. Thank you.
The response my resident got in response to this application for a Freedom of Information request to do with the proposed Shottendane development was as follows. TDC confirmed that they hold the information that was requested but were exempt from answering. As councillors, we have a duty to represent and work in the best interests of residents. They trusted us with their vote and trust us to do the right thing for them, their standard of living, their environment, for the betterment of Thanet, and not to please outside bodies who threaten that which they hold dear. It is incumbent on elected members to think of the electorate and not to blight their lives by this devastation of the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. Mr.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Gregory. I just want to address the point that's been raised, well, 2 points really. One about the recent result of the JR at the school at Leyland Gap. People bring JRs all the time. So people bring JRs against planning decisions all the time. It's an issue of a point of law, so it's a decision by the High Court on, you know, how it's been decided. It's a point of law thing. It's not relevant to the application before you tonight. So the application before you tonight is clear on the papers. You know, the evidence is there, and it's for members to decide that based on the evidence, not based on what's happened in a JR matter to do with a different matter that has all sorts of different issues that aren't relevant to this consideration. So that's the first point. And the second point about FOIs, you know, we have a duty to deal with FOIs, and FOIs are dealt with under their own body of legislation. Again, what is raised in an FOI request is not relevant to the consideration of the application tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Speaking as Ward Councillor, Councillor Farrance.
Thank you, Chair. This application for outline planning permission from Gladman Developments Limited is now before you for the third time. As you know, the applicants will not be developing the land but selling it on for development. Gladman still maintain that no more than 15% affordable housing is viable on this site. At the previous meeting, councillors described this figure as paltry and an insult to both council and community. Apparently, it isn't viable because Gladman have to make a profit of £20 million. Am I alone in being bemused by this figure? Why could Gladman not make a smaller but very handsome profit and meet TDC's policies for 30% affordable homes? To put this in context, and to quote from the officer's documents before us, currently 29% of our population are on a low income of less than £16,000 per year, and average earnings are within the bottom 20% of the whole of England. So more than 80% of the population in Thanet cannot afford to buy an averagely priced terraced house, and those who are renting in the private sector are spending over 50% of their earnings on living costs, whereas the National Housing Federation identifies that only 30% of England should be spent on housing costs. If anywhere needs maximum affordable housing, Thanet does. Secondly, members and officers have received detailed information from many concerned residents about the serious lack of biodiversity studies and mitigation for this development, and I understand that policy SP30 around providing mitigation for farmland birds is being broken. There have been several requests for the missing bird and breeding bird surveys to be completed. Residents have therefore commissioned an independent ecology survey, and initial high-level observations suggest that farmland birds are indeed present on the site, which was apparently dismissed by the Gladman ecologists. Our farmland in Thanet is possibly some of the oldest in the country, and the wildlife possibly some of the most established. For example, DEFRA states the significance of the area for lapwing, redshank and corn bunting. Gladman have not managed to record any of this. In addition, local residents in the area have listed many wildlife birds, wildlife, many examples which I haven't got time to read out at the moment, but hopefully all the planning committee have received that information. It's impressive. Thirdly, there's the issue of services for the 50,000 new residents who may be coming to Thanet. Currently, I'm extremely worried about the impact of thousands of new residents being proposed in Salmston Ward, where the GP service is already overstretched, so that there are 60,000 patients per GP against the national average of about 2,000. The CCG has only made a requirement for the cost of buildings to meet this need and not considered medical personnel. But this was nearly a year ago. Since then, the CCG has stated clearly that Thanet continues to struggle with a low number of doctors and we have a fragile GP system. Please can officers assure us that they've gone back to the CCG in the light of these recent statements from a few months ago to ask what actions the CCG is taking to recruit more GPs and medical staff to Thanet, which we so badly need. I'm sure TDC cares about the health of our residents in Thanet, particularly when we know that Thanet has the second highest child poverty rates in the south of England, the highest in Kent, and Margate has some of the top 10% of deprived wards in England and Wales. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrance. I now ask Mr Livingston please to give his report.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site in question is outlined in red. So the application is for, it's an outline application for 450 dwellings with road infrastructure on the allocated site, which is in red in front of you members. Just a quick overview of the key information on the screen. So we've got the site here, an aerial image. It's either side of Shottendane Road. This is the local plan map, which shows the full extent of the site being allocated. The areas in yellow are the connecting parts of infrastructure and the roads between Hartsdown Road, Shottendane Road and Manston Road. And this is the high-level parameter plan that's been submitted with the application. So as a reminder, you've got the areas in green are the areas of open space. They've been designed around providing the required provision within the policy specifically, but also to be able to facilitate the drainage solution to ensure that runoff doesn't occur on the site in relation to the built form that's proposed. You've then got in the bottom of the image in the hatched area in red, that is the archaeological exclusion zone where archaeological remains were found, so therefore there's no development proposed on that part of the land. And then you've got the blue triangle, which relates to land that is safeguarded for the proposed major road network development by KCC Highways. The rest of the site is shown in shades of yellow to indicate the different heights that are being proposed. So the report that's in front of you members follows last month's committee, and the application is brought back to members with reasons for refusal and to discuss the issues that were raised in the debate at the last month's meeting. So the debate covered a number of different issues, but the consensus of members and the issue that was raised more than any other was concerns about the under-provision of affordable housing at 15% rather than 30%, and the report considers this specifically at 2.3 to 2.8. So point 2.6 in the report outlines that the key matter is what harm results from the provision of less than 30% of housing, whether or not that outweighs both the evidence that's been produced by the applicant and ratified by the council's independent expert, and the other benefits of providing an allocated housing site. So it's whether or not they outweigh those benefits. Now, the reason for refusal that's been prepared is outlined at the end of the paragraph, specifically trying to capture the concerns of members that were raised to do with the acute issues of affordability in the district and picking up some of the points that were raised. Therefore, that's why it's referred to the housing strategy, the objectively assessed need to pull that evidence forward. Now, as the report goes on to outline, the Officer view is that the viability evidence and the compliance, therefore, because it's been demonstrated that it wouldn't be viable with more than 15% affordable housing, outweighs that specific concern, and then a refusal on that ground would put the council at risk if the application was appealed. And in addition, the concern is that the under-provision of affordable housing wouldn't, in our view, outweigh the benefits of providing 450 houses on an allocated site when the council is in presumption in favour of development under the housing delivery test, and plus the benefits that were outlined in the report to the actual strategic highway network by providing this route around Coffin House Corner. The report goes through the other issues raised, and I'll just pick up some of the points that were raised in the speakers' comments. These are covered at points 2.9 to 2.13, including flood risk, impact on healthcare, and impact on biodiversity. So to pick up the first one with regards to flood risk, a flood risk assessment was provided with the application. That was assessed by KCC as the local lead flood authority. That looked not only at the existing surface water flooding that occurs on the site, but also the strategy of how you deal with flooding when there are the dwellings that are proposed actually on the site. That's why there are drainage solutions that have been proposed, including the attenuation basin, to deal with that issue. Now, KCC, as the local lead flood authority, have confirmed that the strategy is sound, and therefore the proposal would actually include a number of conditions which would secure the submissions of details when the detailed layout comes out, to ensure that there isn't an increase in surface water outside the site as a result of this development. And in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, it's not considered therefore as a cogent reason for refusal on that basis. The planning conditions are there to mitigate that impact, and that is the purpose of a planning condition, and therefore it's our consideration that an inspector would feel exactly the same way. With regards to the concerns about the impact on healthcare, this is specifically referred in the report at 2.11. The CCG, as mentioned, have agreed that a contribution would be sufficient under the regulations of 122 of the SIL regs, which governs what you can actually get money for in terms of a planning obligation. That relates to fixed buildings or expansions of buildings or equipment. It can't be put towards revenue costs of staffing, and it's not considered by officers that there is a directly attributable impact from the result of this development to result in the lack of general practitioners in Thanet. It's very clear and evidence in the report why a cogent reason for refusal cannot be found with regards to that matter. In terms of impact on biodiversity, there is some issues that have been raised with regards to the lack of a breeding bird survey. This was directly addressed in the report last time with regards to what they had submitted the applicant during the environmental impact assessment. There's a phase 1 habitat survey. This didn't pick up the presence of skylarks on site. The application has been referred to Natural England, who obviously decide on which species are protected and not. They have raised no objection to the development on the very specific grounds that they require a condition requiring a landscape and ecology management plan to be prepared at the detailed design stage, which is not what's being considered at the moment. It would be considered at reserve matter stage. So at that stage, it will be about getting that plan in, setting the measures for the establishment and management of the newly created and retained habitats. There will be an increase in biodiversity on this site, very clearly evidenced by the plans that have been submitted, and that has been agreed by KCC Biodiversity and by Natural England. In terms of some of the other issues that have been raised with regards to contamination, again, the officer report that's been put forward, which relays the comments of the contaminated land officer, as well as the Environment Agency, has looked specifically at whether or not there is concern about either existing contamination on the site or from surface water runoff. And again, a condition was considered sufficient by the Environment Agency and also by the contaminated land officer. In terms of the last issue with regards to drainage, this is specifically covered in the report that's at Annex 6. members. It specifically talks about foul drainage and network capacity. As you'll be aware, the provisions of the Water and Infrastructure Act requires Southern Water to agree for a connection to the drainage network under that legislation. But what they can require, and they have to require, is that there is sufficient capacity within the network for the dwellings to attach to it, and which is why they will often have a developer pay money to upgrade the existing capacity to cover that drainage. There is a specific condition which would be put on all strategic major sites such as this, which will basically mean that it restricts occupancy of the development until sewage infrastructure is provided as requested by Southern Water. Each phase would be restricted in occupation until the infrastructure for that phase has been agreed and provided, to ensure that there is no issues with regards to flooding or indeed capacity of the drainage network. And that is in compliance with the strategic policy in the local plan which talks about drainage. So to pick up the other point that the report covers, the council has received a letter from the applicant which is appended to the report, and this is discussed at 3.1 of the report. Now, this states that members could defer for approval subject to the full 30% affordable housing being provided on site as well as previous obligations, and this would rely on external funding becoming available or market changes that would make the development viable as time goes on. And when it becomes viable, the 106 agreement by the developer would then be signed on the basis of 30% affordable housing. Now, this is an option for members. It's not advised by officers, as the determination would be dependent on elements which are outside the council's control, as in whether or not the MRN bid comes forward or whether or not market conditions are there. So therefore the officer recommendation is still to defer and delegate for approval as outlined in 4.3. There's also a concern that it would open council for a non-determination appeal if effectively the decision is not made and it's waiting for the submission and agreement of the legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Detailed report there, and I know from the last meeting a lot of those questions, hopefully for members, have been answered. Coming to members, if I may, Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you'll bear with me. This is extremely difficult. We've got a local plan that says that's been agreed by council, foisted upon us by government that we have to have a local plan, and this area has been agreed for housing. The officers have a difficult task in dealing with policy, again, that's agreed and agreed by government, and they have to follow those processes. You know, the officers are not going to be here specifically to say you've got to do this. They come up with a recommendation that we either go along with or we don't. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. Secondly, one of the issues really that really hasn't been fully discussed in my opinion is the road traffic plan laid down by Kent County Council, and I couldn't attend the last meeting, although I did foolishly watch it on YouTube live. I hasten to add. I was shouting at the screen because I wanted a question asked, and no one asked the question, and I've asked that question of the local plan manager as to how and why was this site looked at and put in as part of the local plan for housing development, because it's clear from the processes that we've gone through here over the last two meetings and this one that this is a difficult site to develop. So therefore the applicant, this was dealt with through that local plan process, and the applicant would have known that this is a difficult site to develop. Anyway, if you bear with me, Chair, I just want to quote something that's come back from the local plan manager, and which he says, and I quote, "It's probably worth noting, although it says at background information, that one of the reasons for identifying this site in the local plan was to facilitate the completion of the inner circuit, which is the highway issue throughout the site, in line with the transport strategy to alleviate pressures on the road network in Thanet. Now, I don't agree with that, because I don't think this will, and I'll get to that in a minute, in Thanet, and achieve the long-term transport improvement, public transport, walking and cycling, blah, blah, blah. So a major part of this, it would seem to me, in this land being allocated, was to ensure that Kent County Council can get its highway traffic flow through. I would just like to remind members who may or may not remember that there is a development that's got consent behind Salmston Grange. Now, part of that development under through the highway strategy is that Nash Lane would be cut off to traffic heading towards Westwood. This traffic layout will not solve the Coffin House corner issues. It will create more and more problems for this area, which will then spread out, and it will affect everybody in here and affect everybody in Margate, to be quite honest. I quite often use the Manston Road coming across from Ramsgate, coming down to going down to watch some football. However, the issues of traffic coming down from Manston Road trying to go onto Shottendane Road are awful. 9 times out of 10, the traffic line goes back past the cemetery and down towards the Manston tip. So, and trying to get out there is a nightmare. I don't think that the traffic plan that they've got within this development makes that any easier. I believe it will make matters worse. That's my opinion. I also cannot support the fact that we may, if and buts, get 30% affordable housing if the developer gets money from somewhere. We can't deal with it. We can't have that. We can't make this decision on that basis. So we've got to look at what we've got, and sometimes, members, we have to take a stand, right? Whether we lose on appeal, we need to make a stand. And I think we have to make a stand for our residents, we have to make a stand for ourselves, because I think if we don't do that in this case, if we lose it, and we know that there would be costs. But this is only an outline application, it's not a full application. So I really have concerns with this, and I wish to refuse. I will vote to refuse this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. I'm going to bring in Mr. Earlyman once again.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on the highways point, I think just to give members some clarity with regards to actually the development that's shown on the screen, in fact, because they've superimposed the development at Salmston Grange, which has the resolution to grant for the link through from Nash Lane to Manston Road. As Councillor Alban mentioned specifically, that development would lead to the closure of the Nash Lane arm at Coffin House Corner, with the traffic then routed round through the local distributor standard road to try and reduce the amount of signal times effectively at the junction at Coffin House Corner. But in addition, that development also brought forward a change in alignment and prioritisation at the junction, which is mentioned, of Shottendane Road and Manston Road, that you can see on the screen next to the listed building here. So at the moment, Manston Road joins Shottendane Road, but the prioritisation would change. It would be that Shottendane Road would join Manston Road. And that will demonstrably free up traffic flow through Coffin House Corner on the basis of that. It's the specific justification linked to the development at Salmston Grange to do that. Now, as members are aware, in the report it very clearly goes through in quite a lot of detail about the assessment that's been done on the basis of transport, specifically with regards to modelling, specifically with regards to traffic flows both generated by this development, but also the traffic flows currently in existence around the site. And in terms of that principle of this having a strategic route through this site to deal with that, That has been adopted by this council. It is in the local plan, and therefore it is allocated and anticipated that that will come forward. And so that principle is not up for consideration by members. It's about whether or not the timing of the roads is sufficient, and again that is covered in the report in terms of what would be proposed in terms of getting a prioritisation and a time frame forward, again at reserve matters stage, because obviously this is, as Councillor Orr was mentioned, it's an outline stage, so we will be getting more detail about how many houses are on different parcels of land, which would relate to different parts of the routes that are being proposed here, the different links, when they need to come online. That would be part of the considerations that are still to be made, and therefore it is considered that this has been looked at in detail by KCC Highways. It was looked at in detail in a local plan examination, and therefore it would bring forward in officers' views and in the local plan's view benefits to the road network. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and before I bring Councillor Garner in, if I may just touch on to Councillor Orban and to Mr Livingston, it is not Nash Lane that's going to be blocked up, it is Nash Road. Okay, and that, having lived in that area, it is a major, I don't want to embarrass anyone, but that is a Nash Road.
Thank you for that, Chair. I got me roads and lanes mixed up.
I know you always do, but it is an important fact. Nash Lane is completely different to Nash Road. So, thank you.
I was just waiting to see who was first to pick that up,
I
Chair.
thought you might be Councillor Orban.
Waiting.
Nothing changes. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much. Firstly, I'd like to start by thanking officers who've turned this report around, because I know we put a bit of pressure on it, or a bit of pressure was put on by some people to turn this around for this committee meeting, and it's been done. So thanks for that. I agree with just about everything that Councillor Orban has said, especially around the need for us to make a stand on this. And in fact, that is exactly what we did at the last committee meeting. We had a very long debate, we covered lots of issues, and we voted overwhelmingly to refuse this application for a number of the reasons that are outlined in this report. So what we're here to do today is to agree what those reasons are, so that we can finally put this refusal to bed, so we don't have to come back to this. We don't have to come back to this at any future committee meetings. Now, the report outlines a number of the reasons. I guess in terms of ease for us, the first one around affordable housing, that's documented in the report. I suspect we can all agree to that reason. I take on board what the report states about the risk if it goes to appeal, but I think we've said we accept that. So there's the first reason that we can agree on, I believe. When it comes to, in the order that you spoke about them, flood risk, I should speak for myself. I understand that KCC have said we've looked into this and we think what's being proposed and what potential conditions come in, what conditions there are mitigate this, but I don't agree with it and I don't accept it. We've seen over the last few weeks when it rains heavily, Tivoli Brook reappears and floods. So in effect, what we're saying, if this goes ahead, is that we're agreeing an application to build on Tivoli Brook, which doesn't make any sense to me at all, and I don't think it makes sense to a lot of people. So we should, I believe, we should document that as a reason for refusal. On the CCG side, I understand what's being said. The CCG have asked for some money, and it's been accepted or when they were asked a year ago, and it's been accepted that is sufficient. and I don't think we believe it is sufficient. We think it is insufficient, and there is no, I can't agree that there is no discernible impact on the care currently being received by residents in Salmerston Ward, and this will have a detrimental effect. I think that is what we will be saying. It will have a detrimental effect, and it isn't sufficient what they're proposing. And as far as the impact on biodiversity goes, whatever else is said, the environmental impact statements and any other environmental statements are woefully inadequate. And we've seen from a number of different local residents that we know there are various birds that breed on that site. We know there are skylarks that breed there. They've been seen by people, and in fact, as has been mentioned, a number of residents are so concerned about it that they are doing their own survey to prove this fact, and I'm sure that'll be ready to be presented by the council, by us, at any appeal that might come forward to prove actually there are these birds there. And one other thing I just wanted to mention is the lack of hares on the site. Apparently there are no hares there, and I think it might have been, I can't remember if it was mentioned, but maybe we should be asking the police about this, because the police know there are hares on the site, because the police are often up there clearing off illegal hare coursers who wouldn't be up there hare coursing if there were no hares. And obviously their hare coursing needs to be stopped, because if they keep going on there will be no hares, but they can provide the evidence about that. So I believe we've refused this application. We've got these reasons that I believe we could all happily agree to. I know it all now needs to be documented a bit more, but I would propose that those reasons that I've outlined here are agreed and accepted for the refusal of this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Before I bring in Councillor Keane, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to pick up a point with regards to just taking flood risk as a point, the development's it's fundamentally not building on Tivoli Brook. I just want to make that quite clear. Tivoli Brook is over 20 metres away. It's not related to this water course. It's specifically shown in the flood risk assessment that it's not on this site, and therefore this will not build on Tivoli Brook, just to make that absolutely clear for members. Again, this comes down to evidence. This comes down to the fact that it's been modelled by the applicant very specifically to look at surface water flooding. It's acknowledged as an issue on this site. It's not being hidden away, it's being mitigated by the development. That's why they're proposing the mitigation that they're providing. And so a refusal which seems to disregard the information that's been provided would be very damaging to the council, in my view. In addition, the point with regards to what the NHS and CCG have asked for, again, it comes back to what we can deal with under planning obligations and what we can't. We cannot require more GPs to be employed by virtue of this application. It's not directly applicable to a direct link that planning obligations can deal with. It's subject to lots of separate processes. So I think that it's really important that members understand that infrastructure is a key issue, strategically and locally with regards to this. What planning can do with regards to infrastructure and health infrastructure is look at, can existing facilities expand, and then it's the responsibility of the local care provider to staff that service. It's not the responsibility of planning to do that. In terms of impact on biodiversity, again, I go back to Natural England's response, and I go back to KCC Biodiversity's response, specifically looking at what's been proposed, and also very specifically about the mitigation that's being put forward, and specifically the landscape and ecology condition. Just to quote the report in terms of the specific mitigation measures that would be put in place, which would cover breeding birds on site, specific lighting scheme to minimise impact on nocturnal animals, new homeowner information pack, strengthen boundary vegetation through infill planting, open grassland, wildflower meadow. If we go back to the proposal, you can see the open space again, which will be conditioned to provide additional species. And Councillor Garner, in the very first debate, we talked about that, and you obviously referred to the fact that the Biodiversity and Horticultural Officer is supportive of the scheme by virtue of the fact that they are providing more species than are currently in situ on the site there at the moment, which will bring forward more biodiversity impacts. Habitat enhancement for nesting birds, especially on the southwest boundary of the site, including bird boxes. Again, that provision is within the application, and therefore to go against that on the basis of a concern without having a full awareness of these issues would be, again, it would be a very concerning and damaging precedent on that basis. Now, the report specifically looks at what would be a cogent reason for refusal that would be able to be argued at appeal. That's why officers have outlined a reason for refusal based on affordable housing. That was a consensus view that members took. It was a concern that was outlined by the majority of members, and that is why the report has outlined that specific reason in a bit more detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. A couple of points from me before, again, I will come to you, Councillor Keane, I haven't forgotten you. If members of the public can keep their voices down, I know this is a very serious matter for yourselves and your concerns, but we can hear up this end conversations quite loud. Also, I think it's fair to say the reports that this committee gets, obviously from officers, and not necessarily the recommendations, but we have detailed reports, as we're hearing more so on this application. But it's the same even if it's a small application. The officer's role is, as you've seen, to give us as members the report from all the agencies and who are involved in a site. And I know we have if I can say, a lot of talent on this committee, and I mean that. There's people here who know what they're really talking about on various subjects of nature and everything else, but we really must listen to and read what is in these reports, because they are those people are the top people. Whether we agree or not agree, that is up to you, but I think it's quite evident that I know you have concerns, but I think that must be put to you, that what's in our report has come from the appropriate people, and we have to take that on board. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going back to affordable housing. Our local plan is supposed to provide local housing to meet local need, and we need affordable housing. And so how are we ever going to get that when it seems no one is prepared to build them? It says that it's not viable with any more than the 15% we've been offered, but actually the profit margin of 15 to 20%, they're coming in at 16.97%, so almost 2% more than the bottom line. So actually there is some room for play just in that. But also, I wonder whether the benchmark land value is correct, because I was reading about a case in Islington which they won on affordable housing because they said that the benchmark land value had failed to reflect the expectation of 30% affordable housing, and therefore sort of how can we be sure whether our viability assessment adequately reflects that in the figures quoted there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Once again, Ms Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. To come back on the benchmark land value point, so this is it's the very starting point of a viability assessment, because often what will happen is applicants will suggest the benchmark land value is higher because they've paid too much for the site, and therefore they would say the benchmark land value is much higher. For agricultural land, what's been looked at by the council's viability consultants as part of the local plan is looking at a specific rate of 100,000 per acre, and that is including what the government require, which is a premium on top of the actual value of the agricultural land of 11,000 per acre, and allows for the uplift and the expectation of housing, but also includes the obligations that are required as part of it. So that's why the figure of 4.7 million, which has been agreed by Dixon Searle, has been settled on as appropriate. That is the stance that we have taken on other schemes. It reflects, again, the evidence of what's expected as part of the whole plan viability, which is obviously looking on a much more strategic basis, but that obviously has been tested in terms of whether or not the majority of developments can provide 30% affordable housing, and it's on the basis of that specific benchmark land value. The issue on this site is, as we outlined, those abnormal costs, which come from the fact that there's a 25-metre land level difference on the site, with roads needing to join from Manston Road to Hartsdown Road, as well as the fact that this site is allocated for 550 houses, but it can't be proposed for 550 houses because of the very specific things that were found in when the detailed survey work, which always happens after a local plan is adopted, has shown where the archaeology specifically is, what's required in terms of surface water drainage, which has reduced the amount of capacity that this site can provide in terms of housing, and actually losing 100 houses off what the site was going to provide naturally has quite a significant impact on the viability of the site. So that is why the viability evidence that's been provided, which has been tested, and we have gone back a number of times on it, we do consider the benchmark land value to be accurate, and we can agree it on that basis when looking at the viability assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Eden. Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's time that we made a decision. I'd like to make a...
Can I hold you there, Councillor Orban, a moment?
Why?
But I've got Councillor Hart.
Oh, sorry, you didn't say it. I thought the other people were listening to speak.
No,
Sorry,
I
Chair.
was going to... You jump in the gun as always. No, thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a lot of debate on this one, and I think a lot of us are very upset with how this is going to go and how it should be decided upon. This is the report put forward by the officers and everybody else was very good. I mean, it's exceptional. I think we have to accept that we can't do anything about the drainage. They've done a drainage assessment. They believe that's right, and therefore we should accept that. That is not what we should be deciding upon, because that is a fact that can't be proven until it floods. So, I mean, at the end of the day, they believe that's right. With regards to doctors and nurses and everything else, that's beyond our control. We can't do anything about that. We're deciding on how many houses we're going to build in this site, and that is it right that we only get 15% of that gift, if you wish. And I have great concerns about this, because I know, and they knew when they put the bid in, what had to be done. Not that the fact there was 515 or whatever houses was going to be built or proposed on there, but the fact that they could only do 400 odd. Now, they knew that, and they're still putting in a deal that gives us less than 30%. And I must admit, I do agree with a lot of the people here today that we do have to say enough is enough. We gave way on another decision back on Somerston, I think it's Somerston, where we said, yeah, we'll accept that. This time, I don't think we can. I think we have to stick to our guns and say 30% is what we want. We have a very poor population here. And, okay, we've had a few down from Londoners coming in with all the let's not work in London anymore, but that doesn't put up or push up how much people earn. And it's a very difficult, and I think it's a very hard judgment for us to make, to go against what the council say, and the council say we should accept this because this is part of the local plan. And I think it's a very brave decision for us as a committee to go against that. But in my mind, I think we should, not because of drainage, not because of habitat, but because there's not enough houses for us to give to people who are in need. And I think that's the important part that a lot of us are taking on board, and we can accept that if it floods, then they will have to sort it out. They've worked out that it's right. It's the fact they just do not provide the number of houses. If that means that they could provide 25% because they reduced their their 20 million they're going to get, or whatever they're going to get as a cost or a profit from building that, then so be it. If they only get 5 million, well, I think I can live on £5 million, thank you very much. And I think that's the way it should be looked at. You know, just not take so much profit, and just give the rest to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hart. Councillor Wing. I can't see you, Hank. No, I don't mind. Councillor Wing.
Thank you. It's the uncertainty around this that really gets me. So if I get this right, we're giving permission to a developer to build some houses to then sell on. So we don't know what the new developer will actually decide they want to do, whether they're going to come back to planning, to put in some alternative plans, ask for more houses, less houses. The other I share all the concerns. I simply don't buy that that no wildlife. A survey finds no wildlife on that site. I absolutely find that unbelievable. And if I go back to the flooding, it's all very well saying they will have to deal with it, but it won't be those people that will have to deal with it. It will be the people who live in those houses, and it will be TDC, and it will be KCC. As mentioned previously, there remains a considerable flood risk, and given the recent and ever-growing problematic situation of southern water discharging into the sea, an increase in housing numbers, 17,000, climate change that will mean more rain and rises in sea levels that are well evidenced by KCC, has this been modelled to future-proof any housing, or even work out whether this development's viable within the lifespan of the houses? It's all very well to quote provisions and conditions, but the reality for us people and residents that live in Thanet by developments is that sometimes these provisions and conditions are never met. I talk about trees that are in applications that never ever appear in the final development. So I have great concerns, and I won't be supporting this either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Joel Bayford, I apologise, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, I was against refusal of this application at the last meeting. It's for outline only. Many of the issues up for concern would be dealt with then when it comes back with for reserved matters. As far as I'm concerned, in the original report and this current report, all the issues of concern have been addressed, including flooding, lack of GPs, which are not for us to decide tonight. However, I have to accept that most people don't feel the same way. What I do feel is that we should at least be guided by our planning officers about the reasons that we give, cogent reasons, so that if, as we say, we risk losing on appeal, we don't risk having to pay costs as well. So I think we should listen to what they have to say.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Orban, I'm going to draw a line under that, and I'm not being rude to you, because I wouldn't dream of doing that, but I think...
Not in public anyway, Chair.
No, I know that. I think 3 meetings, the debate we've had tonight, I'm going to put this to members, which is... Again, thank you. Didn't see you there, Councillor Hopkins. New glasses. Carry on. That's all right.
Sorry, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, in 2.8, I mean, I do share a lot of the concerns, in particular the affordable housing one. In 2.8, we're given some information about a recent appeal which is relevant because some of the conditions are the same. But I was just wondering, because there's no context there, to what extent that's representative of similar appeals generally, because we're only just told that one appeal did happen. So I just wondered if you'd be able to give us any more on that.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a few different appeal decisions that I think different people have submitted to councillors and as part of the application, but this specific one was looked at following the meeting last time, which was specifically to try and see as an instance where there was agreement in terms of the viability evidence about affordable housing, but members didn't consider that there was sufficient affordable housing provided by a scheme, and on the basis of the particular concerns that this council and the councillors had about lack of provision in the district. So it was to look at an example where the evidence said one thing, that you couldn't provide the development actually in that instance it was zero affordable housing, and it was to give an idea of how an inspector looks at these issues when weighing up the benefits and the harm. That's why it was included, because in that instance the costs on that site were actually about remediation, because it was a site within the urban confines like this is, but it was one that needed to be cleaned up, so there was a quite significant abnormal cost of doing that. In that instance, the application proposed zero affordable housing and zero contributions. And the inspector, when weighing up, considered the fact of what the councillors had said about affordable housing, but considered that the viability evidence and the benefits of providing a site which otherwise would not come forward for development was considered to outweigh that harm. So that's why it was provided as an example, but also specifically to try and inform the decision and the matter outlined at 2.6, which is about members are entitled to give less weight to the viability evidence, as opposed, you can give less weight to it, but in this instance, the evidence is there, which means that it does comply with SP23. SP23 specifically says you've got to provide 30% affordable housing, and that target will only be reduced if the applicant can demonstrate that it would be unviable if they provided 30%. That's been demonstrated, so it's in compliance with the policy. But the specific point raised at 2.6 is to outline that actually, if members consider that actually, even though that policy has been met, there is a serious concern about affordability for the reasons that are outlined in this report in terms of the housing strategy and the objectively assessed need, then you are able to refuse the application on this basis as outlined at 2.6. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Councillor Hopkinson.
Is it okay if I just come back quickly?
So I think I could have been a bit clearer. I mean, I fully see the relevance of this appeal case to ours, but what I meant was to what extent, how many other appeals are actually going on? I mean, for example, Councillor Keane mentioned that a case in Islington, went to appeal but was rejected. So I mean, I don't know how many of these appeals are going on, and I don't know, to what extent that one is representative of what's going on broadly.
I mean, there are hundreds of appeals that are going on. In fact, there's quite a significant backlog of appeals that the planning inspector are dealing with at the moment. This is an issue that does come up. Viability assessments are looked at. Issues of affordable housing and provision of planning obligations is something that is considered a lot by the planning inspectorate. This is a recent appeal. It was determined literally a few days before the previous meeting we had in June. So that's why it's been provided, because it's the most up-to-date and relevant appeal that we could find with regards to the issue. The one thing in addition in this instance that is outlined in the report is, in that instance, the council could demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land. We cannot at the moment because of not providing and not meeting the requirements of the housing delivery test, which is why, again, the report does have to outline that. So the members do have to be aware of that fact if they are going to refuse it on the basis of the reason given. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, members, as I was saying, I think after 3 meetings, yourselves, the debate has been very good. Totally understand people's concerns. I also would like to thank the officers for their reports, particularly this one, as has been said already from Councillor Garner, very detailed. That's what you asked for. But therefore, I am going to put to members the option of 4.1. Now, I'm not sure if members have the options in front of them, but I will read this out and I will be looking for a proposer. 4.1 is for members to refuse the application on the lack of sufficient affordable housing as outlined at 2.6 in the report. Proposed by Councillor Orban. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hart. Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask you a question? Just so we're clear about what's happening, please.
I've come to the end of debate, Councillor Garner. I think
If we wanted, I mean, there are 4 options there.
yes.
So if we want, say, option 4.2, as I suggested earlier, then we need to vote against 4.1. So if we can have a new proposal.
Yes, you're right. Yes. I put 4.1 to yourselves at the moment. I'm not sure how many people have got the options in front, but I'm quite happy to read them out. Okay? Okay. Councillor Hopkinson.
Sorry, I wonder how this actually works then, because so if we have a vote on 4.1 and reject it, because we want to see whether or not we might go for 4.2. I mean, is it possible to go back to 4.1 if 4.2 doesn't come? Because it just seems to me there's a problem with the order here. I mean, if you've got a preference that you want 4.2 as your first choice and 4.1 as your second, I just wonder if the mechanism we're going to use is going to allow us to express that order of preference.
I'm asking Mr. Livingston to come back on that one. Councillor Hopkinson.
Thank you, Chair. It's not unfortunately, it's not a question of preference. It's the motion that has been to propose and seconded, as Councillor Garner said, is on the basis that the application will be refused solely on the affordable housing issue. If that is voted down, because members consider that one of the other options is what they would want to happen, then it would be effectively to vote against that motion. And then it will be about finding a new motion to propose, and then that will then be a motion that's then subsequently voted on. So it is about deciding on specifically on the motion that's in front of members first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did Councillor Garner propose a motion that was seconded and then was overtaken by the debate?
Yes. Yes, he came in after. He came after. Councillor Orban and Councillor Hart.
The motion has been proposed. It's on
Yes,
the table.
yes.
Yeah, and then Councillor Garner after came in after that, so it's on the table.
No, I
Right.
know that, but did he propose option 4.1? I just wondered, all right.
All right. Members, please, we do have a motion proposed and seconded, but
Can I just request that, a yes to your question earlier, can we reread the 4 options, please? I know we had different... I can't find them. But so many... Thank you. So many thousands of pages here. I'm struggling, I'm going backwards and forwards like yo-yo. Page what?
Don't
Thank
blame me. Mr. Livingston's going to take the blame for that. Okay, members, I put option 4.1 to you. As I say, it's been proposed and seconded, which I will read it out again to you. Now, please vote on this if you're for or against. Members refuse the application on the lack of sufficient affordable housing as outlined in the report 2.6. Those in favour of that option, please show your hands. Yes, I'm for. Yes, yes. Yep. Yep. Those against? Did you put your hand up?
I think you better do it again.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Helen. Those in favour? Sorry, there's a miscount there.
No.
Against? 2 abstentions? 2. Thank you. That motion therefore is carried. Okay, members. We don't have to go another thing. No. Thank you, members. Thank you, members of the public. We haven't finished our meeting tonight, and I think, as I said, this has been extensively debated, and thank you very much, everyone. If members of the public wish to and the other councillors wish to leave, we'll just have 5 minutes. The result is refused.
At least we've got a reasonable ground.
If members of the public didn't hear, I will read it. The motion 4.1 is to refuse the application on the lack of sufficient affordable housing as outlined at 2.6 in the main report. All right. I know, don't. I've got to the stage where I print off what I need to, you know.
Ian, thanks. At least it's not as bad as it could be. Yeah, I was going to say, I'll take it.
Are you going now?
No, I thought I'd see the rest of it out
All right.
while I'm here.
Well,
But fortunately, since I knew well, at least it's on some kind of planning ground. So I shall.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you for all your help, by the way. No, I'm not sure what's helpful, but
No, you were.
I
Thank
it's fine as long as this isn't the start of kind of just a rejection of every housing.
that's what I said to you earlier, that's what's worrying me.
And I think we just need to think about that because now we're late in how we address them.
These groups are popping up everywhere.
Do you want to turn your mic off, Chair?
Thank you, members, for your patience there, and Mr. Alban with his shorts on, I'll ask him to stand up in a minute. Right, agenda item 6 is schedule of planned applications and public speaking. If there are any site visits, members, they will be on Friday the 6th of August. If there is any, that'd be quite an outing for us as we haven't been out for a long time. Agenda item 6A is the planned application for approval of Foresters Arms in 48 Boundary Road, Ramsgate. Speaking in favour of the application is Mr. Oliver still here. Thank you, Mr. Oliver. I'm sorry we've kept you quite some time. Right, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. This application, the current application, the original was approved for dwellings as opposed to back to a pub. However, the current owners want to keep it as a community pub. The main issues that I've seen arising are to do with people not quite understanding whether it's a pub, whether it's houses, whether it's flats, and I'd just like to assure everyone it's turning back to a pub, not a nightclub, not a fast food restaurant, not anything else. It's just solely a pub for the current owners. It's been a pub since 1860, I believe, or thereabouts. The current owners bought it knowing it was a pub, but also knowing that there was an application in for converting it to houses, which got rejected, I believe, 2 to 3 times. So their view on it all was to keep it as a pub for the community, to give employment to certain people for the community. And that's really all I've got to say on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. I can't imagine a nightclub in Boundary Road.
Exactly.
Speaking, raising points of concern is Mrs. Hankinson. Mrs. Hankinson.
Yes. I'm concerned of the garage that they are, it was a workshop and they're converting it into a garage. Now at the moment when they pull their car out, they drive it right up to the front of my house. The road is so terribly narrow. And yes, it was approved for a 2-bed and a 3-bed property. And I have an article here from Thanet Extra, 9th of March, saying that it was going to be houses, not a public house. So therefore I am in disagreement with it. And they've also done a lot of building work, which I don't think they've been permitted to do.
I'm sure that will be looked into, but thank you very much, Mrs. Hankinson. Mr. Livingston, I believe you're giving the report.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Sorry, could you push the button to turn your microphone off, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is outlined in red. The application is for the erection of a 2-storey rear extension, a part single-storey extension with formation of parking following demolition of structures at the rear of the building. So the proposal would alter the public house, which has been closed since 2018. This isn't applying for a change of use. The use is still as a public house, so it's not considering the actual principle of that use. The extensions that are occurring would alter the pub, but also extend the existing flat that's on the upper floor of the building. So, going through some aerial photographs, you can see in the image here the roof plan. So you can see at the rear of the building a number of single-storey structures that are present at the moment. To give you the angled view, so this is a view looking towards Alma Road from the east of the site, and then looking back to Boundary Road. So you're looking in, if you can see where the mouse pointer is, members, you're looking in around the centre of the image to the existing single-storey structures, and then in this view, just turning again around the corner. So we're now looking from the north. You can see at the moment the presence of an extension on the neighbouring property to Foresters Arms, but then you can see a view on Alma Road with the structures which pretty much cover the entire footprint of the site, with a little courtyard in the middle at the moment. So this is the property itself. So we're going to go down Alma Road to look at what's there. So this is the single-storey side element of the building. So as mentioned, there has been some building works that has occurred on the site. So this, and there'll be another view in a second, on the right-hand side shows an increase in the height of the existing side element of the building. Now, this element is not within the application, so it will separately require planning consent. So we're not considering what's been built on that part of the site, but the proposal would demolish the existing garage that's there and workshop use, and create a vehicular parking for 2 parking spaces. You can see there's already a drop curb that's there for the garage, and there are already yellow lines in front of it as well, and you can see obviously parking that's occurring at the front of the neighbouring property. So this is looking back towards the building itself. You can also see that the rear extension that is being considered by members this evening has indeed also already been constructed and has block work that's present. You can also see how it relates to the neighbouring property, which has an extension at first floor level. So you can see it's not protruding past that first floor extension on the neighbour. And then this is a view further down, again just showing how at the moment the garage at the back there steps out from the neighbouring property, that's the element here that's to be demolished as part of this proposal. So this is the site in yellow, and then this is the proposed roof plan for the development. So we'll look at this in a bit more detail closer up. You can see where those parking spaces are present where the garage unit was, and the roof form shown as a hipped roof comes out from the back of the building in line with the extension on the neighbouring property. So just looking at the front elevation, this plan does include on it an internally illuminated sign. That needs separate advertisement consent. Again, not for consideration in this application. Members would not be approving it as part of this scheme. The rear elevation at the when the application was submitted, I'll rephrase, what's being proposed is for an extension to come out. So it's not the full width of the property, but it's coming out in the area in the centre of the site. So it's set in from Alma Road. Then this is the side elevation from Alma Road itself. So you can see the side elevation of that first floor extension that the neighbour has, and the proposal would be in line with that extension, but with a hipped roof on it there. And then this is the internal side elevation. So we're seeing a section through the building, which is obviously attached to the neighbour. You can see that is then the extent of the extension, but as outlined in the photos, it doesn't protrude past the neighbouring first floor, so you wouldn't ever see this elevation because of what's already been constructed next door. I'm sorry, that's just a repeated one of the other elevations. So the existing plan of the pub is on the left-hand side of the image, and the proposed plan for the pub is on the right-hand side. So what you will see in the centre of the rear area, currently you have a structure that covers some toilets on the left-hand side here, and a seating area, has a courtyard, and then has some other toilets. What's being proposed is that there is an extension at ground floor in the centre of the site, so to remove some of that courtyard. There's also an extension, single storey, on the right-hand side of the image here to replace the store that's currently in situ. And then what's happening at the rear is a garden is being created by virtue of the demolition that's occurring, with parking for 2 spaces being proposed with a fence across the site. And this is the elevation showing basically what you would see with internal on the right hand side, but just showing the height of the fence, which is a 2 metre high close border fence at the rear of where the parking area is. The first floor plan again just shows the extension to the residential property upstairs to create a sort of new lounge to extend that into a 2-bed unit. And then this is just the roof plan showing the proposal. So the main issues for members to consider is the impact on the character and appearance of the area, the impact on living conditions of neighbouring properties, and also the impact on highway safety. Now, in terms of the concerns that officers had initially, it was to do with the arrangement of parking as proposed. So what was originally proposed, sorry, I'll just click through, I'll go back now, to find the actual plan showing the site. It's this one here. So there was a concern about the size of the spaces. Originally 3 spaces were proposed and they were too small, and Highways raised a concern. Even though this is what's referred to as a non-protocol application, so Highways wouldn't normally comment on it, we sought the Highway view because of our concerns about it, and they did confirm that the spaces that were provided wouldn't be big enough. So that's why they've reduced it to 2 spaces specifically, with larger spaces to accommodate vehicles. Again, the drop curb is already present on the site with the garage that's there. Also, there were concerns from environmental health that even though the whole site is covered in terms of curtilage at the rear, as effectively a public house, the creation of a garden at that area, which currently has just got single-storey structures on it, could lead to noise and disturbance for residents there. And so there is a specific condition put on the application that the gate effectively will be locked at 9:30, and you can't use that garden after 9:30, which is the issue that environmental health raised. So then that is conditioned as part of the application. So overall, the application is recommended for approval as it's considered that the design wouldn't be significantly harmful to the character appearance of the area. The extension itself doesn't extend past the neighbouring property to cause an impact in terms of sense of enclosure or outlook, and doesn't create any more overlooking. And also the highway safety issues have been dealt with by virtue of the change in the amount of parking. Thank you, Chair.
Excuse me, may I speak?
I'm afraid not, Madam. No, I'm afraid not. I move the officer's recommendation be adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I called this application in.
Excuse me, Steve, could you, thank you.
Can you press your button on your thinking? Yeah. I'll start again, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I called this application in on contact from residents in Alma Road who were concerned, and one of which was Mrs. Hankinson. I went to the site yesterday and had a look, and wasn't pleased to see that there is a first floor extension already gone up and the building on the side has already gone up. But as we know, we can't. That's not an issue for us to discuss this evening. However, what it does say to me is, should we grant consent for this, in relation to conditions, is there any trust there that they've just gone ahead and built what they wanted to build, and are they going to comply with the conditions? Anyway, my concerns were on the overdevelopment of the site, and also the main thing really was the parking and the highway issues. I'm very pleased to see that it's going to remain as a public house. As I said, as the gentleman said there, it's been one since about 1800 and frozen to death, as they say, and I'm pleased with that. But I do really have concerns for the residents in relation to the garden. There's never been a garden there. There's never been a pub garden at that public house, even since about 1900 or something. So I'm concerned for noise. I'm concerned for the noise for the neighbours. And for those of you who don't know, Alma Road is tiny. The photographs don't actually do it an injustice, if you like, for the size of the street. And it's a cul-de-sac as well. So to go down, you have to go down the bottom, and hopefully you can turn around at the bottom to come back up. So I do have concerns about this, Chair, but I want to hear what other members have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Do any other members wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Orban, actually, my only concern on that was the lateness of the garden in the public house. I mean, 9:30 is quite late if you've got small children, and they're next door, and there's never been a garden before. I would consider sort of 8 o'clock, 8:30 late stuff.
I'm going to come in there, Councillor Hart. That's not for us to decide. That would be under licensing.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't mind. Okay. Any other Councillor Fellows?
Yeah, I just wondered if there's any conditions can be placed on the parking area, and so it's not a customer parking area. So, I mean, I know Alma Road is very tight. What you don't want is constant comings and goings to that parking area, which it says they're owners, but if they're empty, then people using the pub are going to be trying to use them, I would have thought.
The application before members only conditions the arrangement. It doesn't condition the use. Obviously, it's been stated, as you say, it's on the plan saying it's owner's parking. If it was used by custodians of the pub, it's not considered that it have a material difference in terms of on the road, because obviously if the parking's not laid out in accordance with the plans, then there's a problem, there's a breach of condition notice. In terms of the actual highway safety issue, in terms of parking in that area, that's exactly why highways looked at it in terms of make sure those spaces are big enough. So in terms of the impact of people parking there, there isn't anything that would be able to manifest necessarily as a planning condition, because a car parked in that place is the same if it's the owner or if it's the actual custodians of the public house that would be there. It is also in a very sustainable location, it's important to note, and obviously previously the pub had no parking attached to it, so I don't think it would be difficult to prove there's a harm with it without it being available if chosen for members of the public.
I just want to come
Mr.
back.
Chairman,
Sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt once more, and I know you said I can't speak,
I'm afraid,
but it wasn't meant for two cars.
Madam, I can't
Sorry.
allow you to speak. I'm sorry. That's the rules of the committee. I'm sorry.
I just want to come back on that. Obviously, it is a tight road, and picking up on what the lady's saying about, I mean, obviously, cars coming and going, especially in the winter time when it's dark. The cars parking in those spaces, the headlights are, the road is like 10 foot wide. It's just, I just think it should be some sort of stipulation on there that it's owners parking only, and there's no comings and goings throughout the evening to those parking spaces.
I think, Councillor Fellows, that could be rather difficult, but I think that could be under enforcement if it has to be. But again, I understand what you're getting at. Are there any other speakers? Okay, members, the vote is for approval, so if you are minded to approve, could you please show your hands? That includes me. Those against? Abstentions? That has been carried. Thank you for that, members. Moving on now to agenda item 6D, which is 49 St Peter's Road, Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr Brown.
Thank you, Chair and members. Can I just suggest a correction? It's 49 St Peter's Court, not Road.
I beg your pardon, that's my fault. On my paper it is St Peter's Court. Beg your pardon.
Firstly, the careful consideration of previous outline permitted planning and also pre-application advice has been considered. And as a neighbour directly adjacent to the proposed property, we've taken careful consideration of the impact on our local neighbours. The proposed bungalow is mirroring the bungalow opposite the site, and you'll hopefully see that we've taken the update to the planning application consideration of the comments that have been made by our neighbours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Brown. I will ask once again Mr Livingston for his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for the erection of a single-storey two-bed dwelling with the creation of vehicular access. Just one point to update members. The report doesn't include a comment from Broadstairs and St Peter's Town Council. They voted to refuse the application. They recommended refusal on the grounds of cramped and congested character and impact on the character of the area on that basis. So the main issues include the impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on living conditions, and impact on highway safety as the principal issues for consideration. So the site is outlined in red. You can see the footprint of the dwelling that's proposed on the screen. I'm going to just go through the aerial images of the site. So you can see St Peter's Court there with the sort of cul-de-sac T shape with the site just adjacent to that, and then going through some of the isometric 3D views. So we can see the area next to the property here when the photo was taken, showing landscaping on there, which we'll look at as a tree survey was submitted. You can see from this image that there is a mix of bungalows directly opposite the site and two-storey properties, all with a very strong gable design, nearly entirely detached or sort of link detached in the road. So this is another view just showing again the style of property around there in the area. And then this is an important view to just understand the relationship between the existing built forms. So you can see number 49 in the centre of the image and the area of land adjacent where the dwelling is proposed. And then this is just another angle, again showing that specific space in the street scene. So this is the site in question. So number 49 is on the screen, and the area that would be proposed for the bungalow is directly in the centre of the image. Then you can see the row of properties there. On that side of the road, you've got 2-storey properties, again with that very strong gable design. This is another view just showing the relationship with the garage of the neighbouring property. So you can see that garage is set quite far back into the site, and you can also see some very prominent trees at the rear of the site, which are obviously very significant in scale. This is directly opposite the site, so you can see that you have a bungalow design, and these are found further up St Peter's Court as well. And again, it's indicative of a planned development that all occurred obviously at the same time, but with the different styles shown. And then this is just turning to your left, so it's the other end of the T-junction, so you can see the relationship between the dwelling there being on the corner with a garage set back directly opposite the site. And so just to confirm, on the other side of number 49, the distance between the neighbouring properties there. And then this is the last, I believe it's the last view, just showing that space from the other angle. So, as mentioned, the proposal would be for a new single dwelling in the side garden of the property. Looking at the existing site plan, so what you can see here is the location of the existing landscaping of the actual trees that are on site. So the very significant scale trees are at the rear of the site here, so behind the garage of the neighbouring property. And what's being proposed is that those trees are being retained, the boundaries being reinforced with a small bay tree being retained as well, and it's proposed to put a dwelling within the gap next to number 49. A key point to look at, members, here is the proposal for a new vehicular crossover, which is proposing to provide 2 off-street car parking spaces. There is provision in the garage because of its size for a parking space within there, but it's not something that we would necessarily sort of bank on, because most people I'm sure would agree, garages are often used for storage of other things. So that's why it's key that in this instance 2 parking spaces are provided. So going through the plans themselves, so this is the proposed elevation, so you can see it's matching the design of the property opposite in terms of its style and in a general form of being a gable fronted property with white cladding. The brick is proposed to match the yellow stock brick on number 49. So that comes forward on that basis. The garage on the right hand side is set far back from the front elevation, and we'll see that when looking at the side elevation. In terms of the rear elevation, that's been proposed to be rendered, so it's not proposed to match the style of the front, but it's not visible from anywhere, so it's not considered that would, in officers' views, have an impact on the character appearance of the area. This is the side elevation, so again showing that the garage is actually set quite far back on that property, and we'll look again at the site plan to show its relationship with the existing garage on the neighbour, so you can get an idea of where that is. And then this is the other side, which obviously would be directly adjacent to number 49. So this is the existing street scene. You can see at the top the gap itself, the distance from the side of number 49 to the garage of number 51. So therefore what's being proposed is to put a dwelling in that gap, and again with the garage that's there being set far back, so you would read the main mass of the property as being the section with just the 2 windows in there. So it is considered by officers that there is sufficient space for a dwelling on the site. There is previous outline approval from 2004 which approved a dwelling on this site, and I'll show you the plans of that. That was approved only at outline stage though, so the detailed design wasn't fixed, but the layout and footprint of the building was. We do consider that this is the most appropriate solution for developing this site as being a bungalow, to ensure that there is still some space around the property. It would result in the loss of open space on that corner, but it isn't considered to be significantly detrimental to the overall area by virtue of putting that on the site. You can see on the bottom image as well that the bungalow is set behind number 49, So in longer views down St Peter's Court, the bungalow would be hidden behind number 49, just as the open space is at the moment. So again, this is the image to show the relationship. If you look on the right hand side, members, you'll see that the garage is there. The wall that is present, which is set forward of that garage, is around approximately the position of where this garage would be for the new dwelling. So you can see that the garage would be pretty much where the mass of planting is at the moment with that brick wall, with then the dwelling coming forward, but not as far forward as number 49. So that just shows you in a bit more detail that relationship. So at the top you've got the garage, then it steps forward for the single story garage, and then the main gable frontage of the property is set back from the front of number 49. The application isn't considered to have a harmful impact on the living conditions of neighbouring properties. It's obviously single story with a hipped roof away from number 49. Even though number 49 are the applicants, we still need to consider the principle of putting a dwelling next to a unit of accommodation in case we set a precedent in terms of the relationship between properties, even though obviously the applicant is agreeing to this impact. In this instance, it's considered that the distance away as well as the single story height wouldn't result in a significant impact in terms of sense of enclosure because of the fact that the main body of the roof hips away. And obviously the bungalow scale is generally considered to be appropriate in terms of the impact on the rest of the dwellings in the area, and as you saw from the close, it's far enough away from the other units that go around that T junction. Just to show you that impact on neighbours in a tiny bit more detail, on the left hand side here you've got the layout of the ground floor, which shows the side windows for that dwelling, which obviously previously looked into a garden, but now will be looking towards the side of the new dwelling. You can see that all those windows are secondary windows, so they've all got another window facing forward or back to ensure there is sufficient outlook, that they're not the primary windows of a habitable room. In terms of the 2004 plan, this is the plan that was approved in 2004. Obviously we are talking about 17 years ago, so policy has changed. The impact of the character and appearance in its general strokes has not changed in terms of considerations, but obviously the policies have changed. But it's considered relevant to put in front of members that this has been approved previously. It was approved even though it hasn't got any elevations as a bungalow to be similar design to the ones in the road, and so it's worth just pointing that out to members. So overall, the application is recommended in this instance to defer and delegate for approval. That's because we need to secure the contribution towards the Strategic Access Management and Monitoring Plan, and therefore we've got a draft unilateral undertaking, but we haven't got a signed unilateral undertaking that secures that contribution, which is why it's being delegated for approval, subject to getting that legal agreement and the safeguarding conditions that are attached. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I called this application in after being contacted by a few of the neighbouring residents who raised some concerns about it. I think as I said, as Mr. Livingston said, what's missing from the report is the report from the Town Council Planning Committee, who discussed it quite length. I'm not on the Town Council Planning Committee, but it was discussed there and recommended for refusal by the Town Council for a couple of reasons. They agreed with the residents who'd asked me to call it in that the design was, as Broadstairs Society said, out of keeping with the original design concept there. But that open space at the one side of the hammerhead, which we saw with quite an abundance of vegetation on, was part of that design for that area. And there was also, that was the main concern, I think. But there was also concern that it was out of keeping with the rest of the rest of that hammerhead area. So that's why I called it in here to be discussed, because I did share their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Are there any other members who wish to discuss? Okay, thank you. Councillor Bayford, did you indicate there? Okay, thank you. Yeah, do you want a mission this time? No, with some chickens or something. Thank you, members. Right, I will put this to you. Those in favour, please show. Myself. Those against? One. Abstentions? Thank you, Councillor Wing. That is, motion has been carried. Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Yes. So thank you to the Chief Executive to keep an eye on us tonight, I think. So. Yeah. Thank you, Matty. Right, that concludes public speaking for this meeting. As Councillor Hart knows, he has declared an interest in item 6B, so I would ask politely to Councillor Hart to leave the chamber. Keep walking. Okay, well, I like this, the way it's written down here. Once Councillor Hart has left, I can start again. So I will call upon the clerk, James, to read out the remaining planning applications. If there is a member wishes to reserve any application, will they please call out as he reads. James.
Thank you, Chair. So the final two applications for consideration this evening is item 6B, which is 32 Shakespeare Road, Birchington, and item 6C, which is 20 Avesbury Avenue, Ramsgate. Okay, thank you.
Does anybody wish to? Thank you, members. That does conclude this evening's. Oh yes, sorry, I always forget that piece. I'm sorry. Yes, could I have a proposer, please, for those determinations? Thank you, Councillor Orban, and a seconder, Councillor Cook. And do you agree? Thank you, members.